One answer, many questions. Chinese medicine is that balance, and it's not just one thing in isolation. It's that one thing in the whole context of the thing. So the context of what you're having and what you're doing with your life is going to be different to the context of what I'm doing with my life. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. It's Marie Hopkinson here. I'm here to talk to you about dampness and everyone's favorite topic on this channel. Not really, but dampness is a problem that plagues many of us. And today's question is a question I get asked repeatedly in lots of different ways. One answer, many questions. So things like, hey Marie, what about these foods for dampness? So for instance, I had a video that was about different kinds of milks or talking about dairy products and dampness. And a person recently said, what about almond milk, or what about oats milk, or what about these other milks? How dampening are they compared to these other things? Now, I could go into another long video about that exact answer, but the real answer to that question is got to do with what else you eat, not that one food in isolation. That's what makes it more tricky. It's not just sort of like, is milk dampening or is milk not dampening? Or is almond milk dampening? Now, if you're at that level where you're asking that question, you probably are at the level where you need to understand a bit more about Chinese medicine to be able to make a decision for yourself about things. And something to remember or to be reminded about is that yin-yang symbol, right? So the Tai Chi symbol of the white representing the yin and the yang, and the dark representing the yin. So this idea of like day transformed into night, night transformed into day. Nothing is ever completely one or the other. There's a hint of each in each other. So nothing's absolute. And this is where it can get a little bit hard, because it's not like one exact answer, like, hey, just eat almond milk and you'll be fine, or you won't have dampness if you have cow's milk, or you don't have this other milk. So I'm going to use the example of the plant-based milks versus the cow's milk to give you an example of how to think about this question for yourself, because that's really what you should be thinking now, is how should I be thinking about my body? How would Chinese medicine think about my body? And that's what I try to teach people on this channel. But if you're really interested in learning about that, I've got a 3-part course that you can sign up to. It's part of a bigger 1-year program. And if you decide that you do the 3-part course, and you're like, I really want to be part of the 1-year program, whatever you've paid for the short course, I'll take off the 1-year program for you if that's something you decide to do later on. But you can click the link below to sign up to that. I'll put that in the description to this video. Now, I haven't got all the rest of the course ready for people to sign up to for 2023 yet. And I certainly have a lot of on-demand stuff that I could make, but I haven't had time to kind of make them into courses for you yet. But this is something that you can have. The other ones you can't have because they're not there yet. I just have run out of time. I haven't made time to do those things. So I wanted to give people a 3-part understanding of like how to really, really think about your body in terms of digestion, the way our body interfaces with the environment and how that affects our digestion. And then you think about really, how do I think about what should I eat? So once you understand that, then you really set up for the idea to answer this question for yourself. So the real answer to it is got to do with what else you eat, not that one food in isolation. That's what makes it more tricky. It's not just sort of like, is milk bad for me, or is milk dampening, or is milk not dampening? Or is almond milk dampening? Now, you have seen me do videos before. I've lined up, like for instance, the cheese lineup was one of my favorites, right? Lining up all the cheeses and kind of comparing them to each other. There could be an argument made that for some people, certain kinds of things will be dampening no matter what. And for others, depending on what else they eat, what else is in their diet, means that they won't have as much dampening stuff going on. So one of the things that's present in cow's milk that's not present in all of these other milk substitutes, like plant-based milk substitutes, is the yang aspect of it coming from a living being. So milk has come from a living cow, right? Now you could say, yeah, almonds and stuff from are living beings as well, but they weren't a conscious being, right? And there's some yang aspect that comes from that, definitely, like without a doubt. Now milk is typically a yin substance because it's watery, it's dense, and part of how to think about how dampening something is is the mouth feel in your mouth. So something that tastes more creamier. Now, I'm sitting here, it's a morning, I've got my coffee here with my cow's milk because I like that mouth feel. Now, I could make an almond milk, but for me to get that mouth feel of that frothy or that milk that froths, right? There has to be a lot of additives in that almond milk for it to get like that, or even macadamia milk. You should see my kitchen. I've got like 5 or 6 different types of milk in there that I've bought, trying to test out to find the best plant milk. And what I found is these barista style plant-based milks that froth up really well in your milk frother, they typically have a lot of other additives in there. Now, as a person who's interested in natural health and wanting to be natural and for yourself, I think you have to make these things in a relative base and say, is cow's milk going to be detrimental to me? As in, am I lactose intolerant, or do I have some intolerance to it where I just can't have it? That's a different equation. That's a different question. But if that's not the case, then if I'm going to be putting this almond milk in my body, or oat milk, or any other plant-based kind of milks, macadamia milk, all these other different things, right? Rice milk. The more watery that milk is, the less dampening it probably is for you. Like the less it's creamy kind of tasting. But then how enjoyable is that going to be? And if I'm just going to have one coffee a day, one cappuccino a day, or one flat white a day with the frothy milk, that's different to me having 5 coffees a day. And enjoying that, the enjoyment of something isn't something that we really think about that much on this channel a lot. We could talk about that. And I think this is where you have this multifaceted approach to something, and that's what makes it become a little bit more complicated than just saying, oh, have this milk and that, and then you'll be fine. Or this will, your problems will dissolve into oblivion if you just have that. So I think that's the question you need to ask yourself about that. Now, the second thing to ask yourself when you're having that product, especially if it's something new or you're coming into it without any other health problems, is, do I have other health problems happening to me, like symptoms happening? Am I feeling bloated? Am I feeling tired? Do I feel irritable after having this? And that's something that you need to be able to experiment with on yourself when you're having those things. Now, sometimes you notice the absence of those symptoms when you stop having something. So I'll give you a good example of the coffee, right? So a few years ago, I stumbled upon this type of milk called A2 milk, which I didn't know much about. I still don't really know a lot about it. But I was like, what's this A2 milk? And I think I might have heard a podcast on it or seen, it can't have been a podcast because I really don't even know that much about it. But I stumbled upon this information about it. I was like, this is so expensive. Surely it can't be that great, that different. Anyway, I bought some and I tried it. And then 2 or 3 days later, I went back to the same cafe that I normally buy my coffee from, and I ordered the same thing I normally order, which is a flat white, just a normal flat white. Now, I'm one of these people that's always been like, I'm not going to be an almond milk person or a special milk person because I don't want to be a special milk person. I just want to have my normal coffee. Just give me the normal coffee. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I've always drunk that, and I've always generally had quite a bit of coffee in my life. It's one of the things I have, right? So I ordered this coffee. I drink halfway through, and then I start feeling this bloated and gut cramping, like my guts are cramping, like I'm getting the runs or something. Like I was like, and then I had to go to the toilet. And that had never happened to me before. Like I hadn't really experienced that. Now it's the kind of thing that I would experience if I had 4 coffees a day, and I would have just put that down to I've had too much coffee today. Like that's too much coffee, right? You can have a limit. You should have a limit, right? And this is something that I used to do in the past, when I would drink a lot of coffee then. And so I would have attributed those symptoms to you've had too much coffee. That's your 4th coffee. You should stop having the coffee now. So I thought about that, and then I didn't really think much of it. And I thought, maybe something was a bit wrong with that food. When you just have that thought, maybe something's a bit wrong, but it wasn't so bad. I'd gone to the toilet and, obviously it had passed. And then I went back home. I kept on drinking my A2 milk that I'd purchased. And a few days later, I went back to the same cafe because it was nearby me, and I had another coffee again. And the same thing happened. And I didn't realise until I drank half the coffee that I went, it's the milk, because I'm having my same coffee at home, like as in I'm saying the same amount of coffee that I normally would have at home, making it at home with this A2 milk. And then, so then it took me about 3 or 4 times to remember, because I remember ordering a coffee at a cafe a few days later and then going, oh, hang on a minute, I'll have almond milk, or I'll try something else. And it wasn't until I wasn't having regular milk. Now, by regular milk, I just mean the homogenized and pasteurized, the cheapo milk that you buy from the store. So is there something wrong with milk, or was there something wrong with the way that the milk is being produced? I think it's that, because the A2 milk you can look into what it is. It's just different protein, supposedly the original protein. So it's a type of protein that the cows have, and it's supposedly the original milk. And that, if I have that milk, everything's great, everything's fine. Now, I also have been like, oh, well, that milk's expensive, maybe I'll try these other things, I'll try almond milk, I'll try these, but they end up being the same amount of expensive as that milk anyway. And I really enjoy the taste of that milk. I like that milk. So I think there's a few things you have to weigh up in the equation, right? If a food is causing you detriment, like dampness symptoms, like you know it's causing you that, then just stop having it and find another way to satisfy your life without that food in it, some other way, right? So if you are lactose intolerant, so for me it couldn't have been lactose intolerance, although a lot of people would have said that's what those symptoms are, because A2 milk has lactose in it, so it's not lactose intolerance. And you might find this through different products, and that's why I'm a bit dubious about all of these milk replacement products, because to get them to taste as good as they do in a cafe, they have to have like xanthan gum and these other things kind of added in there. Like, you look at what's in there. So I think that's something, I wanted to use this example to explain that question to you, how to think about it. So you have to kind of put on this hat of like, how should I think about my body? And it takes time to learn how to do that. And that's what I'll teach you in my course, if that's something that you're interested in doing, and to think about, okay, my body likes mostly warm foods, mostly cooked foods. Am I giving it that kind of environment? How do I nurture my body in the different seasons and things like that? So if your body's generally healthy, you can tolerate some of these more unhealthier things from time to time, and you shouldn't have too much detriment from it. The other thing is, when your body's generally healthy and you eat these really unhealthy foods, like you buy a bag of snakes alive or some kind of lollies or something, and you eat that and you haven't had sugar for a while, you're really going to notice, you're really going to feel it, how it affects you. Like, I'm sure that many people watching this have children. I don't have any children, but I have a little nephew. He's about 4, and he came over yesterday. And my brother called me and he said, are you, he came over to my shop actually. And he said, are you there? We're just around the corner. We've been to a birthday party. Can we, we might just pop in. I said, yeah, pop over. And he said, oh, he's full of sugar. He's just had a birth, lots of these cakes and stuff. Now, growing up, my little nephew didn't have a lot of sugar. They purposely didn't give it to him till he was actually about 2 years old. And he was really good with that. Like, he was able to, he just didn't seem like he was missing out. And then eventually they just, obviously you don't want to miss out on society, like having cakes and enjoying people's birthdays. But when he came in, he was like, he's normally, he's not a hypo kid. I wouldn't say he's hypo, but he's alert. He's not a docile kind of kid. And I love him so much. He's a great little nephew. But anyway, I just looked at his eyes and I said to my brother, he was looking like this. I said, he looks like he's on crack. Like, look at his eyes. Like, and he's just talking to me like this with his little beady eyes and telling me all these things about, oh, and Auntie Brea, I did this and I did that. And look at that. And then he's like going around the shop. He said he starts running up and down the hallway. And I said to my brother, I said, look, I said, that's the sugar, isn't it? Like, he looks like he's on crack. So if you don't have something, you can then really notice the effect of it on your body. Whereas if you have that all the time, you might just think, oh, that's how I am. I'm on crack all the time. Or that's how I am. I'm bloated all the time. Going back to my story with the A2 milk, it wasn't until I stopped having that A2 milk that I actually realised I did have some of those symptoms. Not the cramping and the because I wouldn't have, I just used to think that was me having too much coffee. Whereas now I can probably have 4 coffees a day and I don't get those symptoms because it was the milk. It wasn't, and I just thought, oh, that's the effect of too much coffee. Now, I don't have 4 coffees a day every day. I do have, that's my thing, right? Coffee's my thing. So, and that's the thing with Chinese medicine, is to keep things in a balance. And sometimes you do need to go onto a very restrictive diet so that you can work out what's working for you and what's not working for you. And what's readily available in your environment what grows easily, and what's like grows easily because of the climate and because of the season that you're in is generally good for you to have in terms of if you're having something very abnormal that's being imported in, it won't be the right foods for that season. And that can influence our body's ability to tolerate certain things. So your genetics, your DNA, who you are as a being inside you is all different, right? But then also we become different by the way that, the tolerance that we have where we live. I have spent a lot of months living in Asia, China, and sometimes like for long periods of time, as in a long period for me would be like 3 months to, I've spent 6 weeks at a time, and I've spent lots of periods of like 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a time being there for business. Been to China 10 or 11 times. And I always notice a difference in the tolerance of the foods that I have there. I can eat the foods that are there, easily there. But if I come back here and eat those foods, now they're different. They're differently cooked here. They're differently made. And when I'm in China, I literally eat anything that's there almost. Like I don't eat duck's heads and things like that. But like I eat food off the street. I just try to accustom myself to it. When in Rome, do what you're doing. That kind of stuff, because I think that's part of being healthy is our ability to adjust to the environment. So I hope this video has been useful and helpful to you somewhat, because I think it's important to remind ourselves that Chinese medicine is that balance, and it's not just one thing in isolation. It's that one thing in the whole context of the thing. So the context of what you're having and what you're doing with your life is going to be different to the context of what I'm doing with my life. And as a practitioner, that's what I'm kind of looking at when I'm advising people what to have. Like I might give them a list of foods saying these foods are dampening foods, or they're not great for dampness. But how much they affect you or how dampening they are to you might be different to another patient. And it might be different for you now versus for you in the future. So you might decide, I'm going to go off these foods for a while and see what happens. And then I might try to reintroduce them. Let's say you had 5 foods that you know are highly dampening. So let's say like camembert cheese is pretty dampening. Creamy sauces are pretty dampening. Butter and like oils. So not necessarily fats off of meat, like meat fats, but they are if you just make lard and then cook those other things in there. But if you're not having all of those things, or the other things that are massively dampening are things that are made with trans fats or carbohydrate foods. So let's say you go onto a keto diet. I've got another video on this kind of a thing. You can tolerate a lot of these so-called dampening foods, but were you to have those dampening foods like the fats and the oils and the carbs, then no, suddenly you can't tolerate those things. It's almost like those oils become more dampening, and because it's actually the carbohydrate quantity that's causing that to happen, or the concept of the packaged foods where you've got sugar and salt together and the various different kinds of carbs in there. So on the other hand, a potato isn't dampening by itself, right? Just a sweet potato or a potato or a pumpkin, or a cob of corn. But if you're having corn syrup, or you're having these processed foods from some of those things, they could be very dampening. So I hope that's helped you to understand it. Check out the link below to find out about the course. You can sign up to that. It's a great Christmas gift to give yourself, something to get into the new year. You can do it at your own pace as you go. And there's also opportunity for you to email me and to connect with me to ask questions if that's what you want to do along the way. I will be offering some more courses in 2023 that are live ones, in-person ones. But yeah, I'd love to help you to discover your body more. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Appreciate your support, and click the link below to find out about that. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. What are you doing with your life? Subscribe, and all the best. And thank you so much for your interest in learning Chinese medicine.